My fiancé went on a hidden trip with my sister and family members. When they came back, the house was already sold. I had packed all my belongings and moved overseas. Can you imagine the sting of betrayal when you realize the person you're about to marry, and your entire family, has been secretly plotting to take everything you own? What if the business trip your fiancé mentioned was actually a lavish vacation with your sister and parents, paid for with your wedding fund, all while they planned your financial ruin? That's what happened to me. It was pouring rain that night, the kind that lashes against your windows like the world outside is trying to get in. I was in the kitchen of the beautiful Victorian home Aunt Betty had left me, carefully plating a beef Wellington. 2 years. 2 years since Brett proposed. 2 years of planning a wedding that felt like it was getting more expensive and complicated by the minute. The house smelled incredible, rich pastry, savory beef, the truffle oil Brett loved so much. I'd set the table with Aunt Betty silver, lit the candles, even bought that expensive Cabernet he liked. This was supposed to be a celebration. My phone buzzed. It was Brett. I wiped my hands on my apron, swiped to answer, forcing a smile. Hey, honey, you're cutting it close. The Wellington is perfect. I even opened the wine to let it breathe. Valerie. His voice was choppy, cutting in and out over wind and what sounded like airport announcements. Hey, listen, babe. I'm so sorry. Something huge came up with the downtown commercial project. Investors are freaking out. I have to fly to Chicago tonight. My smile faltered. Right now. Chicago. Tonight, Brett. It's our anniversary dinner. I've been cooking since I got home from the pharmacy. I know, he said, sounding impatient, almost annoyed. Not sorry. Don't start, Val. I'm doing this for us, for our future. You know how much commission I'll make on this deal. It'll pay for the honeymoon. He shifted the phone, and for a split second, the camera angle went wide. He was definitely at the airport. But there, just over his left shoulder, I saw it. A neon pink suitcase. Not just any suitcase. It was a limited edition designer bag with gold hardware. I knew it because I had bought it. I'd bought it for my sister, Tiffany, for her birthday last month. She'd thrown a tantrum, saying she needed it for her influencer aesthetic. And as usual, I'd caved to keep the peace. Brett, I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Is someone with you? What? No, just the team. Look, they're calling boarding. I have to go. Love you. Mean it. He didn't wait for me to say it back. He lowered the phone to end the call, but his thumb must have missed the red button. The screen didn't go black immediately. It just pointed down at the floor, capturing his shoes walking briskly. And then I heard it. Is she gone? The voice was unmistakable. High-pitched, mocking, and sickeningly familiar. It was my mother, Linda. Yeah. Brett's voice came through clear as a bell now that he wasn't pretending to be stressed. God, she's so needy. It's exhausting. Well, you handled it perfectly, sweetie, my mother purred. Now put that phone away. Tiffany is waiting by the gate with the drinks. Hawaii, here we come. Finally, Brett laughed. A cold, cruel sound. A week without the wet blanket. Let's go, Mom. Then the screen finally went black. I stood there in the middle of my beautiful kitchen. The silence of the house was deafening, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. My hand was gripping the counter, so hard my knuckles were white. Chicago business trip? No. They were going to Hawaii. My fiancé, my mother, my sister. The whole family was going on a vacation. And not only was I not invited, but they had lied to my face, to my very soul, to leave me behind. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The rich smell of the beef Wellington suddenly made me nauseous. I turned off the oven with a shaking hand. Asterisk why? Why lie? If they wanted a family trip, why not just tell me? Was I that unwanted? Was I just a wet blanket? Asterisk I walked into the living room, my legs feeling heavy, like I was wading through concrete. I sat down on the sofa, staring blankly at the fireplace. And that's when I saw it. Brett's old iPad. He usually kept it in his briefcase, but he must have left it on the charging dock in his rush. As I stared, the screen lit up with a notification. It was a message from Tiffany. I leaned forward, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The preview of the message was visible on the lock screen. I can't wait for us to announce the good news next week. She is going to freak out when she realizes the house is basically ours. Hurry up, baby daddy. Baby daddy. The house is ours. The room spun. I reached out, my fingers trembling uncontrollably, and picked up the iPad. I knew Brett's passcode. He never changed it. It was 12/18, Tiffany's birthday. I had always thought it was just because she introduced us, a nod to friendship. Now, that number felt like a knife in my gut. I entered the code. The padlock icon unlocked. And just like that, I opened the door to hell. The moment the home screen loaded, a physical wave of nausea hit me. The background photo wasn't me. It wasn't us. It was a selfie of Brett and Tiffany, cheek to cheek, lying in a bed that looked suspiciously like the one in the guest room of my parents' house. I went straight to the messages. I didn't want to believe it. Part of me The pathetic part that I'd spent 32 years trying to please these people wanted to believe this was a prank, a misunderstanding. But the text thread labeled "The Winning Team" shattered that hope instantly. The group chat included Brett, my sister Tiffany, my mother, Linda, and my father, Hank. Everyone was there. Except me. I scrolled up, my eyes burning as I read messages from just a few hours ago. Mom. Did you get the keys to her safe, Brett? We need to make sure we have the original deed before the wedding. Brett. Got them. Copied them yesterday while she was at the pharmacy. She has no clue. She thinks I was fixing the hinge on the closet door. Tiffany. God, she is so stupid. A pharmacist with 0 brain cells. I can't believe I have to pretend to be nice to her for another 6 months. Dad. Just stick to the plan, Tiff. Once they're married and he's on the deed, we leverage the property. That house is worth $1.2 million. That's your startup capital right there. Brett. Don't worry, Hank. I've got her wrapped around my finger. She'll sign the joint tenancy papers as soon as I get back from Chicago. I guilt-tripped her so hard at dinner last night. I dropped the iPad onto the couch cushion as if it were burning hot. I rushed to the bathroom and dry-heaved over the sink. My body was rejecting the information faster than my brain could process it. They weren't just excluding me. They were hunting me. I washed my face with freezing cold water, staring at my reflection. Pale skin. Why? Terrified eyes. Pull yourself together, Valerie, I whispered. You need to know everything. I went back to the iPad. I needed to see how deep the rot went. I opened the hidden photo album. It was password protected, but of course, the password was the same. 1218. Hundreds of photos. Brett and Tiffany in Cabo when he said he was at a real estate conference. Brett and Tiffany at a concert I had bought tickets for, but he claimed he was sick, so I gave them to Tiffany to take a friend. And then the most recent ones. A sonogram, dated 2 weeks ago. The name on the patient file was Tiffany Miller. Hurry up, baby daddy. The text message suddenly made horrific sense. Tiffany was pregnant. My fiancé was the father. And my entire family, my parents included, knew about it. They were celebrating it. They were planning to go to Hawaii to celebrate their new grandchild, funded by the money Brett had borrowed from our joint wedding account. I checked the banking app on the iPad. The wedding fund, which I had contributed 90% of from my salary and savings, was drained. Transaction, Aloha Resorts, $12,000. Transaction, First Class Delta, $4,500. Transaction, Tiffany and Company, $3,200. I felt a scream building in my throat, but it wouldn't come out. It was stuck behind a wall of pure, unadulterated shock. I went back to the messages. I searched for the word house. Tiffany. I don't want to live in that dusty old museum of hers. It smells like old lady. Brett. Babe, we aren't living there. Once she signs the joint tenancy, I own half. We force a sale, or take out a massive home equity line of credit. We take the cash, buy that modern condo downtown you like, and leave her with the debt. Mom. Or just renovate the basement. Valerie is used to being in the background. She can live down there and pay the mortgage while you two take the master suite. She'll do it if you say it's for the family. She's desperate for approval. That comment from my mother broke something inside me. She can live down there like a servant, like a dog. They had scripted my entire demise. They had turned my life into a long con. The wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was a hostile takeover of my assets. I looked around the living room. The shadows from the storm were dancing on the walls. This house. Aunt Betty's house. Aunt Betty had been the only person who ever really saw me. While my parents fawned over Tiffany's beauty pageants and cheerleading, Aunt Betty had sat with me in the garden, teaching me the names of herbs, helping me study for chemistry tests. When she passed away 3 years ago, the reading of the will had been the first time I saw my parents truly angry at me. Betty had left everything to me. To Valerie, the will read, because she is the only one who understands that a home is built with love, not leverage. My parents had tried to contest it. They failed. Then, suddenly, they became nice. They introduced me to Brett. They encouraged the relationship. He's a catch, Val, my dad had said. Don't mess this up. I realized now, sitting in the dark, that I hadn't messed anything up. I was just the mark in their con game. The rain lashed harder against the glass. I picked up the iPad again. I needed to save everything. Every text, every photo, every bank transfer. My hands were shaking, but my mind was starting to clear. The fog of love and duty was lifting, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They wanted the house. They wanted my inheritance. They wanted a war. And they had just made the mistake of leaving their playbook behind. To understand why I was so vulnerable to this deception, you have to understand the ecosystem I grew up in. In the Miller household, there were 2 distinct roles, and they were assigned at birth. Tiffany was the sun, and I was the shadow. Tiffany was the golden child. Born 5 years after me, from the moment she arrived, she could do no wrong. She was bubbly, demanding, and pretty in a conventional way that my mother adored. If Tiffany broke a vase, it was an accident. Or worse, it was somehow my fault for placing it there. If Tiffany got a C in math, the teacher was incompetent. I, on the other hand, was the scapegoat. I was quiet, studious, and plain. I didn't like pageants. I liked books. I liked science. I remember my high school graduation vividly. I was valedictorian. I was giving a speech. I had looked for my parents in the crowd for the entire ceremony. They never showed up. When I got home, holding my diploma, expecting an apology, I found chaos. Tiffany, then 13, had broken a nail during cheer practice. A bad break that bled a little. My parents had rushed her to the emergency room and then taken her out for ice cream to calm her nerves. Oh, Valerie, stop being so dramatic. My mother had sighed when I cried. Your sister was in pain. It's just a speech. You can read it to us later. They never asked to hear it. The only person who came to my graduation was Aunt Betty, my mother's older, estranged sister. She sat in the front row, cheering loudly, holding a bouquet of wildflowers from her garden. Aunt Betty was wealthy, but you wouldn't know it by looking at her. She lived in a stunning historic Victorian home on the edge of town, the very house I was sitting in now. She had never married, invested wisely in stocks back in the 80s, and lived on her own terms. My parents called her eccentric and selfish. I called her my savior. Valerie, she told me that graduation day, taking me out for a real dinner at the nicest steakhouse in town. Your parents are fools. They're chasing glitter. But you are gold. Solid gold. She grabbed my hand across the table, her grip strong, her eyes fierce. Promise me something. Promise me you will get your degree, get a good job, and never rely on them for anything. Financial independence is the only freedom a woman really has. I took that advice to heart. I worked 2 jobs through pharmacy school. I paid my own tuition. I bought my own car. When I landed a job at the city's biggest hospital, I thought, surely now my parents would be proud. They weren't. They just asked for loans. Tiffany needs a new car for college. The roof needs fixing. I gave them money, hoping to buy their love. It never worked. When Aunt Betty died, the grief nearly broke me. But the reading of the will was a spectacle. My mother showed up wearing black, dabbing at dry eyes, expecting a massive payout. When the lawyer read that the entire estate, including the Victorian house, the stock portfolio, and the savings, went to my beloved niece, Valerie, the room exploded. That manipulative little witch! My mother had screamed, pointing at me. You turned her against us. It's not fair. Tiffany wailed. I wanted that house. It has the turret room. It's perfect for my vlog, but the will was ironclad. Aunt Betty had included a specific clause. I'm of sound mind and explicitly exclude my sister Linda and her husband Hank, as they have demonstrated a lifetime of poor judgment and unkindness. For 6 months, they didn't speak to me. I lived alone in the big house, tending to Betty's garden, feeling the ghost of her love in every room. Then, suddenly, the thaw came. My mother called me one Sunday. We've been thinking, Val. We were too harsh. Grief makes people do crazy things. We want to be a family again. Come for dinner. I went. I was so starved for their affection that I ran back to the people who had hurt me, tail wagging. That night, they introduced me to Brett. He's in real estate, my dad said, clapping a hand on Brett's shoulder. Sharp guy. He can help you figure out what to do with that big old house. Maybe fix it up. Increase the equity. Brett smiled at me. He was handsome, charming, and focused entirely on me. I love old houses, he said. They have soul like you. I melted. I thought I had finally won. I had the inheritance, and now, because of it, I finally had my family's respect and a handsome boyfriend. I didn't realize that I wasn't the beloved daughter. I was just the host organism, and they were the parasites. Looking back now, the red flags with Brett were not just flags. They were giant flashing neon billboards. But when you have spent your entire life being invisible, the sudden spotlight of a man's attention is blinding. Brett courted me with an intensity that felt flattering, but was actually predatory. Within a month, he was bringing me coffee at the pharmacy every day. Within 3 months, he was spending every night at my house. He worked in commercial real estate, or so he said. He drove a leased BMW and wore expensive suits, projecting the image of success. But he never seemed to have cash. My assets are all tied up in escrow, he'd say when the dinner bill came, or, I'm waiting on a massive commission check next month. I paid for everything. Dinners, vacations, groceries. I even paid for the repairs on his BMW. I told myself I was being a supportive partner. Aunt Betty's voice was in the back of my head warning me, but my mother's voice was louder. Valerie, don't be stingy, Mom would say. A man has pride. You have all that money sitting there. Help him build his empire, and he'll take care of you later. 6 months in, Brett started talking about the house constantly. It's a great structure, babe, he said, walking around, tapping the walls. But the wiring is ancient, and this kitchen, it drives the value down by at least 50 grand. We should renovate. I like it the way it is, I said softly. It reminds me of Betty. Sentiment doesn't pay the bills, he countered, his tone sharpening just a fraction. If we want to build a future, we need to maximize our assets. This house is our biggest asset. He started using that word very early. Then came the proposal. It wasn't intimate. It was a public spectacle in the town square with my parents and Tiffany watching. Tiffany filmed the whole thing. Finally, Tiffany squealed, hugging Brett before she even hugged me. Now we can really start planning. I thought she meant planning the wedding. Now I know she meant planning the heist. About a week after the engagement, the mask slipped for the first time. I came home early from a shift to find Brett in my home office, going through my file cabinet. "What are you doing?" I asked, startled. He didn't even jump. He just held up a folder. "Looking for the survey of the property. I wanted to see where the property line ends. I was thinking we could subdivide the lot, sell the back acre." "I don't want to sell the garden," I said, feeling a tightness in my chest. "That's where Betty's roses are." He slammed the drawer shut. "God, Valerie, you are so short-sighted. I'm trying to make us millions, and you're worried about some dead roses? Do you want to be a pharmacist forever, counting pills?" I recoiled. He had never spoken to me like that. Later that night, he cried. He actually cried. He told me he was just so stressed because he wanted to give me the world, and he felt inadequate because I had more money than him. "I just want to be an equal partner," he sobbed. "I feel like a leech living here without my name on anything. It hurts my pride." I comforted him. I apologized. I told him I didn't care about the money, and that was exactly what he was counting on. The truth, which I later found in the background check Mrs. Higgins ran, was that Brett wasn't a successful developer. He was a glorified scout for a brokerage firm, and he was drowning in debt. He had $80,000 in credit card debt and a gambling problem. He looked at me and saw a walking ATM. He looked at my house and saw a winning lottery ticket. And my family? They weren't just bystanders. They were his coaches. I remember a barbecue a few months ago. Tiffany was wearing a bikini, lounging by the pool Brett had insisted we install on my dime. Brett was grilling. "Hey, Val!" Tiffany yelled. "When you guys get married, are you going to redo the master bath?" "It's so small." "We haven't decided," I said. "Well, Brett promised us, that he'd put in a jacuzzi tub," she said, catching herself. I looked at Brett. He winked at me. "Just girl talk, babe. Tiff just wants the best for her big sister." I felt a knot of unease then, but I swallowed it down with a sip of lemonade. I was so desperate to keep the peace, to keep the illusion of a happy family, that I let them walk all over me. But tonight, looking at the text messages on that iPad, the illusion was gone. The predator had bared his teeth, and I finally realized I was the prey. The week leading up to this business trip had been intense. It felt like a coordinated attack, a pincer movement designed to crush my resistance. The target was always the same, the deed. Joint tenancy. I had heard that phrase more in the last 7 days than I had in my entire life. It started at Sunday dinner at my parents' house. Roast beef, stiff drinks, and an atmosphere thick with expectation. So, my dad, Hank, started cutting into his meat aggressively. "The wedding is in 3 months. Have you seen the lawyer yet about the property consolidation?" I put my fork down. "I told you, Dad. I'm keeping the house in my name. It's my inheritance." Brett and I discussed a prenup. The table went silent. Tiffany rolled her eyes, so hard I thought they'd get stuck. Brett sighed, a long-suffering sound. He reached over and took my hand, his grip tight. "Val, we talked about this. A prenup. That's for people who plan to divorce. Do you plan to divorce me?" "No, of course not," I stammered. "But Aunt Betty is dead," my mother snapped. "And she was a bitter, lonely old spinster. Is that what you want to be? Alone in that big house with your cats and your money?" "It's about trust, Valerie," Brett said, looking deep into my eyes with that practiced sincerity. "If we are one flesh, we should be one financial entity. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship. It means if something happens to me, you get everything. If something happens to you, I'm protected. It's romantic in a way. Romantic. And it helps with the business," Brett added, lowering his voice. "I can't leverage my assets for the new development deal if my name isn't on the primary residence. The bank sees me as a renter. It's humiliating, Val." "You're embarrassing him," Dad growled. "Emasculating him. What kind of wife does that?" "I just need time to think," I said, shrinking into my chair. "You've had time," Tiffany chimed in. "God, you are so selfish. Brett does everything for you. He planned this whole renovation. He deals with the contractors. All you do is count pills and complain." I looked around the table. 4 pairs of eyes staring at me. 2 angry, 1 mocking, 1 pleading, fake pleading. I knew now. "Okay," I whispered, just to make it stop. "Okay, we can sign the papers when Brett gets back from Chicago." The tension instantly evaporated. It was like magic. "That's my girl." Dad cheered, pouring more wine. "Finally using your brain," Mom muttered. Brett kissed my hand. "Thank you, baby. You won't regret it. This is the start of our empire." Now, sitting in the dark living room with the rain hammering down, I realized how close I had come. If he hadn't gone on this trip, if he hadn't left the iPad, I would have signed. I pulled up a search on the iPad browser. I typed in joint tenancy versus tenancy in common. The results confirmed my worst fears. Asterisk tenancy in common asterisk, each owner owns a specific share. If one dies, their share goes to their heirs, my future children, or back to my family. Asterisk joint tenancy, with right of survivorship asterisk, both own 100%. If one dies, the other gets everything automatically. It bypasses the will. And then I saw a Google search in Brett's history from 2 days ago. California Community Property Laws divorce. He wasn't planning on waiting for me to die. He was planning to get his name on the deed, wait a few months, and then file for divorce. In California, once he's on the deed as a joint owner, he owns half the equity. The house is worth $1.5 million, free and clear. He would walk away with $750,000, or they would force a sale, kick me out, and split the cash. And with Tiffany pregnant, they needed that money. I scrolled further back in his search history. Asterisk, how to induce labor naturally. Asterisk, paternity test costs. Asterisk, quickest way to evict a co-owner. Evict a co-owner. They weren't just going to take the money. They were going to take the house. They wanted to live here. Tiffany wanted the turret room. They were going to raise their baby in Aunt Betty's sanctuary, and I would be left with nothing. A wave of rage, hotter than anything I had ever felt, washed over me. It burned away the nausea. It burned away the sadness. No, I said aloud to the empty room. Absolutely not. I stood up. My legs were steady now. I walked to the safe in the master closet, the one Brett claimed he was fixing. I punched in the code. It opened. Inside were my important papers, the deed, the will, my passport. I checked the deed. It was still in my name, Valerie Miller. Just me. They hadn't won yet. They had made one fatal calculation error. They assumed I was weak. They assumed I was stupid. And they assumed they had time. They were wrong. I needed a witness. I needed an ally. And I knew exactly who to call. Cassie. Cassie had been my best friend since pharmacy school. She was the complete opposite of me. Loud, brash, tattooed, and unafraid of confrontation. She had never liked Brett. From day one, she called him Ken doll with a darker soul. I had drifted away from her in the last year because Brett didn't like her. She's too rough, Val. She's a bad influence. And because I was tired of defending him, I picked up my phone. It was 11 p.m. She answered on the second ring. Val, is everything okay? Why are you calling? You were right, I said. My voice sounded strange, robotic. You were right about everything. What did he do? Cassie's voice shifted instantly from sleepy to alert. Did he hit you? No. Worse. He's screwing my sister, and my parents are in on it, and they're trying to steal my house. Silence on the line. Then the sound of rustling sheets and keys jingling. I'm on my way. Don't do anything. Don't confront them. Just lock the doors. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Cassie arrived, she didn't hug me. She walked into the kitchen, took one look at the cold beef Wellington, grabbed the bottle of wine I had opened, and poured 2 massive glasses. Drink, she ordered, sliding a glass across the island. Then talk. I showed her the iPad. We spent the next 2 hours going through everything. Cassie didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She cursed. Creative, violent curses that made me feel slightly better. Okay, Cassie said, slamming the iPad cover shut around 1 a.m. This is war, and in war you don't cry. You shoot. She looked at me, her eyes blazing. Val, look at me. Stop shaking. They think you are a doormat. They're banking on it. Literally banking on it. I know, I whispered. How could they? My own mother. Because they are narcissists and parasites, Cassie said bluntly. But we don't have time for psychoanalysis. We have a timeline. How long are they in Hawaii? 7 days. They come back next Tuesday. 7 days. Cassie nodded. Okay. We can do a lot in 7 days. She pulled out a notepad from her purse. First, evidence. We need to back up this entire iPad. Cloud. Hard drive. Printed copies, everything. Done, I said. I can do that tonight. Second. Cassie pointed a pen at me. The house. As long as you own this house, they will come for it. Even if you break up with Brett, he's got copies of keys. He knows the codes. And your parents, they will guilt you, harass you, maybe even see you claiming some ancestral right. It's toxic, Val. The house is the poison. I looked around the kitchen. I love this house. It was my connection to Aunt Betty. But Cassie was right. As long as I had this asset, I was a target. And if I stayed here, every room would remind me of Brett's lies. Every corner would be haunted by the memory of Tiffany plotting my eviction. I can't live here anymore, I said, the realization hurting my chest. They tainted it. Exactly, Cassie said. So we scorch the earth. We get rid of the bait. Sell it, I asked. But a sale takes months. Staging, listing, escrow. Not if you sell to an investor, Cassie said. My cousin works for one of those we buy ugly houses corporate firms. They buy for cash, close in days. You take a hit on the price, but you get liquid cash and you get out. Cash, I repeated. Yes, cash. And you know who hates cash? People who want to steal half your equity through a divorce settlement that hasn't happened yet. Cassie leaned in. Sell the house. Take the money. Move. By the time they get off that plane with their lays and their tans, they won't be coming home to a mansion. They'll be coming home to a locked gate and a stranger. A shiver ran down my spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. I have a job offer in London, I said suddenly. Head of pharmacology at a research hospital. They emailed me 2 months ago. I was going to turn it down because Brett said he couldn't leave his business here. Cassie grinned, a feral, shark-like grin. London. Perfect. It's far. It's expensive. And they can't find you. She raised her wine glass. To the new Valerie. I clinked my glass against hers. To the scorched earth. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the sky a bruised purple. I didn't sleep. I called in sick to the pharmacy for the first time in 5 years. And by 9 a.m., I was sitting in the leather chair of Mrs. Higgins's office. Mrs. Higgins was the best divorce and estate lawyer in the county. She was 60, wore sharp Chanel suits, and terrified grown men for a living. She had handled Aunt Betty's will. I laid it all out. The iPad evidence, the texts, the planned joint tenancy fraud. Mrs. Higgins listened in silence, her face unreadable behind her glasses. When I finished, she took a slow sip of her coffee. Men like Brett, she said, her voice low and gravelly, are not just greedy, Valerie. They are sloppy. She opened a file on her desk. I ran a preliminary asset check on Mr. Brett Daniels this morning after you called. Do you know why he is so desperate for this house right now? Because of the baby, I asked. Partly, but mostly because of this. She slid a document across the desk. It was a loan application, a hard money loan, the kind you get from predatory lenders when no bank will touch you. It was for $200,000. He applied for this loan 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Higgins explained. The collateral listed, 42 Oak Street. My house. I stammered. But he can't. He's not on the deed. Look at the second page, Mrs. Higgins pointed. I looked, and there it was. My signature. Valerie Miller. Except I hadn't signed it. It was a good forgery, but the loop on the V was too wide. He forged my signature, I whispered. He committed a crime. Yes, Mrs. Higgins said. And here's the kicker. This loan hasn't funded yet. It's in final underwriting. The lender is waiting for the joint tenancy deed to be recorded to release the funds. That's why he needed you to sign next week. He's already spent this money in his head, probably to pay off gambling debts or book the Hawaii trip. If you sell the house, Mrs. Higgins smiled, a cold, sharp smile. The collateral vanishes. The loan is denied, and Mr. Daniels is left with very angry loan sharks and no way to pay them. And he goes to jail for forgery. If we turn this over to the district attorney, yes, which we will. But first, we secure your exit. Mrs. Higgins leaned forward. Valerie, you have the legal right to sell. You are the sole owner. You don't need his permission. You don't need to tell him. In fact, for your safety, you must not tell him. I want to sell it fast, I said. Cassie has a contact. Good. Do it. Liquidate everything. Move the funds to an offshore account or a trust that I can set up for you, making it untouchable. If you stay here, they will harass you. They will play the victim. They will try to use grandparents' rights or some nonsense to guilt you. I'm going to London, I said. I accepted the job this morning. Excellent. London is lovely this time of year. Mrs. Higgins stood up and walked to her window. Valerie, your parents, they failed you. They broke the most sacred contract of all, the duty to protect their child. You owe them nothing. Not an explanation, not a dollar, not a goodbye. Hearing an authority figure say that lifted a weight off my shoulders I didn't know I was carrying. One more thing, Mrs. Higgins said, turning back to me. When you leave, leave nothing. Don't leave a note. Don't leave a forwarding address. Let their first notification be the lock on the door changing. I plan to, I said. And Valerie? Yes. Bring me the original deed and the forged loan document. I'm going to prepare a little surprise for Mr. Daniels when he lands. It's called a felony fraud indictment. I walked out of her office into the bright California sunlight. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Brett. Hope you're having a good week, babe. Miss you. Work is crazy here in Chicago. Love you. I looked at the text, the audacity, the lies. I typed back. Miss you too. Can't wait for you to come home. I hit send. Asterisk, let him think he's safe. Let him think the sheep is still sleeping. He has no idea the wolf is at the door. Asterisk, the next 96 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Cassie's cousin, Mike, worked for a firm called Primavis Realty. He met me at the house 2 hours after I left the lawyer's office. Mike was a no-nonsense guy in a polo shirt. He walked through the house, taking notes on an iPad. He didn't look at the crown molding or the antique fireplace. He looked at the square footage, the lot size, and the zip code. It's a prime lot, Mike said, standing in the kitchen where my life had fallen apart just the night before. But the market is weird. If you want to list it traditionally, you could get $1.60. maybe $1.7 million, but it would take 60 days to close. I don't have 60 days, I said firmly. I have 5. Mike nodded. Okay. Cash offer as is. No inspections, no contingencies. We close on Monday, but the price will be $1.3 million. $1.3 million. That was $300,000, less than market value. A year ago, I would have balked. I would have thought about Aunt Betty's legacy. But then I thought about Brett's plan to leverage the house for $800,000 and leave me with the debt. I thought about Tiffany raising her baby in my turret room. $1.3 million was still a fortune. It was enough to start over in London. It was enough to never work again if I lived simply. But most importantly, it was freedom. Deal, I said. Seriously. Mike looked surprised. You don't want to think about it? Where do I sign? We signed the preliminary papers, right there on the kitchen island. Okay, Mike said. Title company will rush the search. We signed closing docs Friday. Money wires Monday morning. You need to be out by Monday at 5 p.m. We changed the locks then. Monday, the day before they returned. The countdown had begun. I went into overdrive. I couldn't hire a moving truck because the neighbors would see and might text my parents. I had to be stealthy. I focused on what mattered. Aunt Betty's jewelry, my clothes, my diplomas, the photo albums from my childhood, the few that had me in them. Everything else, it had to go. But I didn't want to just throw it away. I wanted to erase their traces. I went into the guest room, the room Brett and Tiffany had used. I stripped the sheets. I didn't wash them. I threw them in the trash. I took the mattress, the expensive memory foam mattress Brett had insisted on buying, and I dragged it down the stairs by myself. I called a junk removal service to take it away. Bed bugs, the junk, I asked, looking at the pristine mattress. Something like that, I said. Parasites. Then came Brett's stuff. Brett had moved a lot of his things in over the last few months. Designer suits, his golf clubs, which he loved more than me, his collection of expensive watches, probably fake or bought with debt. I didn't burn them. That would be dramatic, but wasteful. I sold them. I created an anonymous account on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Flash sale. Men's luxury items. Cash only. Must pick up today. I priced his $2,000 golf clubs at $50. I priced his Italian leather sofa at $100. I priced his PlayStation and 70-inch TV at $200 for the bundle. People flocked to the house. I met them at the back door. I told them I was an angry ex-girlfriend. They didn't care. They just wanted the deals. Watching strangers carry away Brett's prized possessions gave me a dark, twisted satisfaction. Every empty space in the house felt like my lungs expanding, taking in fresh air for the first time in years. By Sunday night, the house was echoing. It was strange. The furniture I had grown up with, the antiques. I sold most of it to an estate liquidator who came with a nondescript van. You're selling the Chippendale dining set? He asked. The table where my father had yelled at me. Take it, I said. It has bad juju. I kept only 2 things from the furniture, Aunt Betty's rocking chair and her small writing desk. I had them shipped directly to a storage unit in London. Sunday night, I slept on a sleeping bag in the middle of the empty living room. The storm had passed days ago, but the silence in the house was heavy. I pulled up the tracking app on my phone. I had access to Brett's location because we shared a phone plan, which I paid for. Honolulu International Airport. They were enjoying their last Mai Tais, probably toasting to their victory. Probably laughing about how easy it was to fool Valerie. I looked at the empty walls. Goodbye, house, I whispered. Thank you for protecting me. But I don't need walls to protect me anymore. I have claws. My phone pinged. An email from the title company. Closing confirmed. Wire transfer scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. It was done. Now all I had to do was vanish. Monday morning arrived with a strange, hollow kind of silence. The storm had passed days ago, leaving the sky that crisp, hard blue that feels indifferent to human suffering. I woke up on the sleeping bag in the middle of the empty living room. My body stiff, but my mind incredibly sharp. Today was the day. I had spent the weekend systematically dismantling the life I had built for us. It wasn't just about selling the furniture. It was about erasing the evidence of my own foolishness. I walked into the garage, where I had piled up the last remnants of Brett and Valerie. There was the custom cornhole set we bought for the engagement party, $100 waste of money. There were the endless boxes of decorations for a wedding that would never happen. I had contacted a local women's shelter earlier that morning. I have brand new household goods, I told the coordinator on the phone. Linens, kitchenware, small appliances, everything is high-end. Can you use it? We can use everything, she said, her voice thick with gratitude. When can we pick it up? Now, I said. But you have to take everything. I want this garage empty. Watching the shelter van pull away was the first time I felt a real pang of emotion. Not sadness for what I was losing, but relief that these things, bought with my money, intended for a lie, would actually help women who were trying to escape bad situations, just like me. Then came the personal purge. I went to the master closet. Brett loved his clothes. He was a peacock. He had rows of Italian suits, custom dress shirts with his initials on the cuffs, and a collection of sneakers that he kept in pristine boxes. I didn't sell these. Selling them felt too dignified. I took a pair of heavy-duty kitchen shears, and I went to work. I didn't shred them into confetti, that takes too much energy. I just cut one crucial thing off each item. I cut the left sleeve off every suit jacket. I cut the seat out of every pair of trousers. I cut the tongue out of every single sneaker. It was petty. It was childish. And it was absolutely glorious. I stuffed the ruined couture into heavy-duty black trash bags and labeled them donation rags. As I was clearing out the top shelf of the closet, my hand brushed against a dusty cardboard box tucked way in the back. I pulled it down, coughing as dust motes danced in the sunlight. It was labeled, Valerie's Childhood, in my mother's handwriting. I sat on the floor and opened it. I expected to find sentimental treasures. Instead, I found indifference. Inside were my old report cards, all straight A's, never framed, a few participation trophies from events I hated, and nothing else. No photo albums, no baby teeth, no lock of hair from my first haircut. But at the bottom of the box, buried under a spelling bee certificate, I found something that made my breath hitch. It was a small velvet pouch. Inside was a pearl necklace. Aunt Betty's pearls. I gasped. I had been looking for these for 3 years. After Betty died, they had vanished. I thought I had lost them in the move. I had torn the house apart looking for them. I had cried over them. And here they were, in a box labeled with my name, hidden in the back of a closet in my own house. My mother must have taken them. She must have swiped them during the funeral reception, hidden them here, and then what? Forgotten about them? Or kept them as leverage? The realization made me sick. She stole from her dead sister, hid it from her grieving daughter, and then just let it gather dust. I clasped the pearls around my neck. The cool weight of them against my skin felt like armor. "I've got you, Betty," I whispered. "We're getting out of here." At 11 a.m., the wire transfer hit. My phone pinged with a notification from the offshore bank Mrs. Higgins had set up. $1,300,000 credited. It was real. The house wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to Primavist reality. I did one final walkthrough. The house echoed. It smelled of lemon cleaner and emptiness. I walked into the turret room, the room Tiffany had claimed for her future nursery. I stood in the center of the room and closed my eyes. I tried to summon some nostalgia, some sadness for the home I was leaving, but all I saw was Tiffany's smug face and Brett's deceitful smile. "You wanted this house so bad," I said to the empty air. "I hope you enjoy the view from the sidewalk." I walked out the front door and locked it. I placed the keys under the mat, exactly as Mike, the new owner's rep, had instructed. My Uber to the airport was waiting. I had 2 large suitcases and a carry-on. That was it. 32 years of life, condensed into 50 pounds of luggage. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back. Mrs. Higgins was right. The rearview mirror is for people who are afraid of the future. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was just cold. I pulled up my phone and checked the flight tracker. Delta Flight 432 from Honolulu to Los Angeles. Status on time. Arrival tomorrow, 2 p.m. They were on their last day of paradise. They were probably packing their bags, tan and relaxed, excited to come home and ruin my life. I settled into the leather seat of the Uber. "International terminal, please," I told the driver. "Big trip?" he asked, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "One way," I said. "I'm moving to London." "Sounds like an adventure." "Oh, it is." I smiled, touching the pearls at my throat. "But the real adventure is going to be for the people I'm leaving behind." The international terminal at LAX is a strange place. It's a limbo between worlds, filled with people running towards something or running away from something. I was doing both. I checked my bags and went through security. My body felt light, untethered. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a text from Brett saying he knew that he had sensed the disturbance in the force. But there was nothing. Just silence. I went to the airline lounge, poured myself a glass of sparkling water, and opened my laptop. It was time to construct the weapon. I had been drafting the email in my head for 3 days, but now I had to make it real. Subject: update on the wedding and future plans. I added the recipients first. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anyone. 2. Brett Daniels, Tiffany Miller, Hank Miller, Linda Miller BCC. Brett's boss, Mr. Henderson, the HR department at his firm, the pastor of my parents' church, every aunt, uncle, and cousin on both sides of the family, our entire wedding guest list, and the loan officer at the bank Brett tried to get the fraudulent loan from. Mrs. Higgins had found his email. I took a deep breath and began to type. "Dear family and friends, I am writing this to inform you that the wedding scheduled for October 15th is canceled. There will be no rescheduling. I know this comes as a shock to many of you, especially since my fiancé, my sister, and my parents are currently enjoying a lovely family vacation in Hawaii. A vacation they told me was a frantic business trip to Chicago. But lies have a way of coming out, especially when you leave your iPad unlocked on the living room table. Attached to this email, you will find a few interesting documents that explain my decision. Asterisk screenshots of the group chat, the winning team. where my parents, sister, and fiancé plot to force me into a joint tenancy deed to access my inheritance. Asterisk photos dated 2 years back confirming the sexual affair between Brett Daniels and Tiffany Miller. Asterisk the sonogram of their unborn child, conceived while Brett was engaged to me. Asterisk data from forensic accounting of the $16,000 stolen from our wedding fund to pay for the secret Hawaiian getaway. Asterisk a copy of the loan application where Brett forged my signature to secure $200,000 from a predatory lender. To my parents, you always wanted Tiffany to have the best. Now she has my fiancé. I hope they are very happy together. Please do not contact me. I am no longer your daughter, your ATM, or your scapegoat. To Brett, the house on Oak Street has been sold. The locks have been changed. The new owners are very strict about trespassing. Also, I believe the district attorney will be in touch regarding the forgery. Good luck with your empire. To everyone else, I am sorry for the drama. I am moving overseas to start a new life where people tell the truth. Please respect my privacy. Sincerely, Valerie. I read it over 3 times. It was cold. It was factual. It was devastating. I attached the zip file containing all the evidence. The photos were high resolution. The text threads were complete. There was no room for denial, no room for misunderstanding. I hovered my mouse over the schedule send button. I checked the time. Their flight landed at 2 p.m. tomorrow. They would get their bags, get in a cab, and arrive at the house around 3:30 p.m. I set the email to send at 3:45 p.m. Pacific time. Right when they would be realizing their keys didn't work. Right when the panic would be setting in. That's when their phones would start blowing up. That's when the world would know what they did. I clicked schedule. A small pop-up appeared. Message scheduled for tomorrow, 3:45 p.m. I closed the laptop and slid it into my bag. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I felt a strange sense of calm, like the eye of a hurricane. Flight 102 to London Heathrow is now boarding. The announcer's voice echoed through the lounge. I stood up, smoothing down my coat. I walked to the gate, handed over my boarding pass, and walked down the jet bridge. As I stepped onto the plane, leaving American soil, I felt the heavy cloak of the old Valerie, the people-pleaser, the doormat, the shadow, slip off my shoulders. I wasn't just leaving the country. I was leaving the version of myself that allowed them to hurt me. I found my seat, first class, because why save money for a wedding that isn't happening, and accepted a glass of champagne from the flight attendant. Celebrating something, she asked kindly. I looked out the window at the tarmac, heat haze shimmering in the distance. Yes, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. I'm celebrating a funeral. Oh, I'm so sorry, she looked confused. Don't be. I toasted the air. It was a long time coming. Landing in London was like waking up on a different planet. The air was cool and smelled of damp pavement and diesel, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of California. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the gray, beautiful smog of freedom. I had rented a temporary service apartment in Kensington while I looked for something permanent. It was small, modern, and blissfully empty of memories. No ghost of Aunt Betty, no shadow of Brett, just clean lines and silence. I unpacked my 2 suitcases. I placed Aunt Betty's pearls on the dresser. I hung up my coats. Then I sat by the window with a cup of tea, English breakfast, strong with milk, and looked at my watch. It was 11:45 p.m. in London, which meant it was 3:45 p.m. in Los Angeles. The email had just been sent. I picked up my phone. I had bought a UK SIM card at the airport, but I had kept my old US number active on Wi-Fi just for this moment. I wanted to see the mushroom cloud. I turned the Wi-Fi on. For a second, nothing happened. Then the phone practically convulsed in my hand. Buzz, 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 buzz. Notifications flooded the screen, so fast I couldn't read them. Asterisk missed call, Mom 4. Asterisk missed call, Brett 6. Asterisk missed call, Tiffany 2. Asterisk text from Mom Valerie. What have you done? Answer the phone. Asterisk text from Brett. Babe, this isn't funny. The key doesn't work. Where are you? Call me now. Asterisk text from Dad. You ungrateful brat. You ruined us. Delete that email immediately. Everyone is calling me. Asterisk text from cousin Sarah. OMG Val. Is this true? I am so sorry. They are monsters. Asterisk text from Brett's boss, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Daniels, please contact HR immediately regarding the allegations in Miss Miller's email. I watched the messages roll in like credits at the end of a movie, a horror movie. I took a sip of my tea. It was warm and comforting. I could picture it perfectly. They were standing on the porch, surrounded by luggage, tired from the flight, the key jamming in the lock, the confusion. And then the simultaneous pinging of phones in pockets and purses, the realization dawning on their faces like a slow-motion car crash. They thought they were coming home to conquer. Instead, they came home to a fortress that had locked them out and a digital firing squad that had just taken aim. I didn't feel guilty. I checked my heart. Nope. No guilt. Just a profound sense of justice. Justice isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it involves destroying reputations. but it was justice nonetheless. I swiped the notifications away without opening a single one. I wasn't going to engage. Silence is the loudest scream, Mrs. Higgins had said. I turned off the US SIM card. I removed it from the phone and placed it on the table. Then I picked up a tiny metal pin and ejected the tray. I took the small plastic chip, my connection to my parents, to Brett, to the pain, and I dropped it into my hot tea. I watched it sink to the bottom. Now they couldn't reach me. I was a ghost. I was a rumor. I was the monster under their bed. When I dropped that SIM card into the tea, I knew I had crossed the Rubicon. There was no going back. I had just nuked my entire family dynamic and left my fiancé homeless, jobless, and exposed to the world. It felt terrifying, but also incredibly empowering. If you are listening to this, and you have ever felt small, invisible, or used by the people who were supposed to love you, I want you to know that you have teeth too. You just have to be brave enough to bear them. I didn't witness the scene on the porch personally. Obviously, I was 5,000 miles away, sleeping the deep, dreamless sleep of the vindicated. But I know exactly what happened. How? Because Mrs. Higgins is thorough. And because my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, is the nosiest woman on the planet, and she hates my mother. Mrs. Gable had been watching the house like a hawk. Ever since the for sale sign went up and came down in 3 days, she knew something was up. So when the taxi pulled up that Monday afternoon, she was ready with her iPhone, recording from her second-story window. She sent the video to Mrs. Higgins, who sent it to me a few days later. I watched it on my laptop in London, sipping wine. It was better than any reality TV show. The video starts with a taxi van pulling up to the curb. It's sunny in California. Brett gets out first. He looks tan, fit, and arrogant. He's wearing a Hawaiian shirt, unbuttoned too low, sunglasses on his head. He stretches, looking at the house like a king surveying his castle. Then Tiffany spills out. She's wearing a floral maxi dress, holding her stomach dramatically. She was barely 8 weeks pregnant. There was nothing to hold. She points at the turret window and says something that makes Brett laugh. My parents, Hank and Linda, get out last. They look smug. My mother is already directing the taxi driver on where to put the bags, treating him like a servant. Just leave them on the porch, she yells. My son-in-law will get them. Son-in-law, they hadn't even waited for the wedding to give him the title. Brett walks up the path, swinging his keys on his finger. He's whistling. He walks up the steps to the heavy oak front door. He puts the key in. He turns it. It doesn't turn. In the video, you can see him frown. He jiggles it. He pulls it out, looks at it, wipes it on his shirt, and tries again. Nothing. What's the hold up, Brett? My dad yells from the sidewalk. I need to use the bathroom. The lock is stuck. Brett calls back. He sounds annoyed. Valerie probably changed the deadbolts or something. She's so dramatic about security. He starts pounding on the door. Val, open up. It's us. Stop playing games. Tiffany waddles up the steps. Ugh. She's probably sleeping or crying. She's such a buzzkill. Just use the garage code. Brett goes to the keypad on the garage door. He punches in the code. Beep, beep, beep. Error. He tries again. Error. She changed the code. Brett says, his voice rising in pitch. Why would she change the code? Maybe she's mad we didn't call, Mom suggests, walking up the driveway. Call her, Brett. That's when the phones start going off. In the video, it's almost comical. You see Brett reach for his pocket, then Tiffany, then Mom. They all look at their screens for a solid 30 seconds. Nobody moves. They are reading the email. I watched Brett's face transform. Even from the grainy distance of Mrs. Gable's phone zoom, I saw the color drain out of him. He went from tan to gray in seconds. Tiffany screams first. It's a high-piercing shriek. She knows. Oh my God. She posted the pictures. What do you mean she sold it? My dad bellows, reading the email. She can't sell it. It's family property. My loan. Brett shouts, looking at his phone in horror. She sent this to the bank. She sent this to Mr. Henderson. Panic sets in. Real, primal panic. They start banging on the door and windows. Valerie, my mother screams, her face twisted. Open this door. You can't do this to us. I'm going to kill her. Tiffany is sobbing, stomping her feet. My reputation. She sent this to everyone. Suddenly, the front door opens. But it's not me. It's a man. A very large man in a black security uniform. And next to him is a German shepherd that looks like it eats burglars for breakfast. The family freezes. Can I help you? The security guard asks. His voice is calm, deep, and threatening. Who the hell are you? Brett demands, trying to regain some alpha male posturing but failing miserably. Where's my fiancé? Get out of my house. Your fiancé, the guard smirks. There is no Valerie here. This property is owned by Primavist Realty. I'm the site security, and you are trespassing. Trespassing. Dad sputters. I'm her father. This is my daughter's house. Not anymore, the guard says. He points to the private property, sign freshly staked in the lawn. The previous owner sold the property and vacated the premises yesterday. She instructed us that any unauthorized attempts to enter by, he looks at a clipboard, Brett Daniels, Tiffany Miller, or the Miller parents should be treated as a hostile intrusion. She sold it, Tiffany whispers, her knees buckling. But the nursery, the money. You have 5 minutes to remove yourselves and your luggage from the property, the guard says, his hand resting casually near his belt. Or I call the police, and I believe they are already looking for a Mr. Daniels. That was the moment it hit them. The house wasn't just locked. It was gone. The asset they had banked their entire future on, the collateral for their loans, the roof over their heads, it had evaporated into thin air while they were drinking my ties. The standoff on the porch didn't end quietly. My family doesn't do quiet. They do loud, entitlement-fueled tantrums. According to the police report I received later, my father tried to physically push past the security guard. I have rights, Hank Miller shouted. I paid for the roof on this house. Asterisk a lie. I paid for it. He just recommended the contractor. Asterisk the security guard didn't flinch. He simply unclipped the leash of the German Shepherd. The dog barked, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated in the chest of everyone watching. Dad stumbled back, nearly tripping over a Louis Vuitton suitcase. Call the cops, Mom screeched. This man is stealing our house. Arrest him. Please do, the guard said calmly. I'll wait. Someone did call the cops, but it wasn't my mother. It was the neighbors. Mrs. Gable and 3 others had gathered on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching the spectacle with glee. They had endured my parents' snobbery for years. This was their Super Bowl. 2 police cruisers rolled up 5 minutes later. When the officers stepped out, Brett tried to rush them. Officers! Thank God! This man is squatting in my fiancé's house. She's missing. We think he did something to her. Officer Martinez, I know his name from the report, held up a hand. Sir, step back. Are you Brett Daniels? Brett froze. Yes. Why? We have a flag on this address and your name, Officer Martinez said. He didn't look friendly. We received a notification from the district attorney's office regarding a priority fraud investigation. And he looked at his partner. We have a frantic call from a Mr. Henderson at West Coast Realty claiming you have company property, and he wants it returned immediately. Brett's face went from gray to ghost white. That's a misunderstanding. My fiancé is having a mental breakdown. She sent out a crazy email. The email with the forged loan documents. Officer Martinez asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, we got a copy of that, too. The bank called us. Asterisk the bank called? Of course they did. Predatory lenders don't like being defrauded, either. Asterisk, we need you to vacate the premises immediately, the officer said to the group. The new owner has provided all legal documentation. You have no right to be here. But we have nowhere to go. Tiffany wailed, sitting on her suitcase, mascara running down her face. We gave up our apartment. We were supposed to move in here. Not a police matter, ma'am, the officer said. Move your vehicles and your belongings, or we will have them towed. The humiliation was absolute. Under the watchful eyes of the police, the security guard, and half the neighborhood, my family had to drag their heavy suitcases back down the driveway. They couldn't get a taxi. The driver who brought them had left long ago unpaid. Mom had told him, get the bags and I'll pay you inside, which was obviously a lie. They had to call an Uber XL. They stood on the curb for 20 minutes, surrounded by their luggage, while neighbors took photos. My phone in London, which I turned on briefly to check emails, was exploding with updates from Mrs. Gable. Asterisk, Mrs. Gable. Your mom just tried to kick the neighbor's cat. Police warned her. Asterisk, Mrs. Gable. Tiffany is vomiting in the bushes. Drama queen. Asterisk, Mrs. Gable. Brett looks like he's going to throw up. He keeps trying to call someone, but nobody is answering. Nobody was answering because the email had done its work. While they were standing on that curb, the digital fallout was incinerating their social safety nets. My cousin Sarah had forwarded the email to the entire extended family group chat. The one I wasn't in. Sarah, did you guys see this? Aunt Linda and Tiffany are disgusting. I'm blocking them. The pastor of the church replied to my email directly. Reply all. Pastor John, I am deeply disturbed by these revelations. Adultery and theft are grave sins. Linda, Hank, please do not attend the potluck this Sunday until we have had a serious counseling session. And Brett's LinkedIn? Someone, probably Cassie, bless her heart, had posted screenshots of the forgery and the affair in the comments of his top salesman post. By the time the Uber finally arrived to take them, where? To my parents' small, 2-bedroom bungalow across town, I assumed they were social pariahs. They piled into the car, defeated. The winning team looked like a bunch of losers. I closed the laptop in London. I felt a strange cocktail of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also a deep, exhausting sadness. That was my family. That was the man I was going to marry. And I had just nuked them. Morbid, but then I remember the text. She can live down there. She's desperate for approval. I hardened my heart. They didn't care about me. They cared about the resource I provided. And now that the resource was gone, they were just angry that the tap had run dry. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. "You did good, Val," I whispered. But the war wasn't over. The legal battle was just beginning. And Brett Daniels was about to find out that a forged signature is a lot harder to erase than a fiancé. The next few weeks were a masterclass in the consequences of one's own actions. I settled into my new job in London. The hospital was amazing, state-of-the-art, busy, and full of people who respected me for my brain, not my bank account. I rented a lovely flat in Notting Hill. Yes, like the movie, but smaller and with better coffee nearby. Meanwhile, back in California, the Miller/Daniels clan was imploding. Since they had all given up their leases or sublet their apartments, anticipating the move into my house, they were forced to squeeze into my parents' 1,200-square-foot bungalow. Picture this. My parents, who value their privacy, Tiffany, who is messy and demanding, and Brett, who is used to luxury, all living on top of each other. One bathroom, thin walls, and zero money coming in. Brett was fired the day after he landed. Mr. Henderson didn't even let him come into the office to clear his desk. Security met him in the parking lot with a box. The company property he had to return included the BMW he was driving, which was a company lease. So now Brett was jobless, and Tiffany, relying on Brett to be her sugar daddy, suddenly found herself with a broke baby daddy. The stress was immediate. Mrs. Higgins kept me updated. She was enjoying this immensely. Brett tried to file a lease pendants on the house, she told me over the phone one rainy Tuesday. He tried to claim he had an equitable interest because you were engaged. Did it work? I asked, stirring my tea. Valerie, please. Mrs. Higgins scoffed. I laughed him out of court. You were the sole owner. California doesn't recognize fiancé as a legal title to property. He has zero claim. The judge actually warned him that filing frivolous lawsuits could lead to sanctions. And the forgery? Ah, yes. The DA is building the case. They have the document. They have the IP address from his iPad where he accessed the PDF editor, and they have your sworn affidavit. It's a slam dunk, but these things take time. They want to nail him for bank fraud, too, which is federal. Back at the bungalow, the winning team was turning on each other. My cousin Sarah, who had become my spy, sent me screenshots of Tiffany's Facebook status updates. Asterisk day 3. Family is everything. We will get through this lies and persecution. Asterisk day 10. Does anyone know of any receptionist jobs hiring? Asking for a friend. Asterisk day 20. Some men are useless. If you can't provide, don't promise. Clearly aimed at Brett. Then came the church fallout. My mother, Linda, lived for her status in the church ladies' auxiliary. After the email, she tried to go to the Wednesday prayer group. According to Sarah, when Linda walked in, the room went silent. Mrs. Higgins, who also attends that church, unbeknownst to me, stood up and said, Linda, I think it's best if you sit this one out. We are praying for honesty today. My mother left in tears. She texted me that night. Mom, are you happy? You humiliated me before God and my friends. I hope you rot in hell. I blocked her number. I didn't need that energy. But the sweetest victory was the financial one. Because I had sold the house for cash and moved the money offshore, they couldn't touch it. But they still had debts. The wedding vendors I had booked, I canceled them, but the non-refundable deposits were gone. And since Brett had put some of the upgrades on his credit cards, expecting to pay them off with a loan, he was drowning. The loan sharks, the ones Brett tried to get the $200,000 from, were not happy. They hadn't lost money, but they don't like being lied to. I heard rumors that Brett had to sell his Rolex, the real one, and his designer clothes just to pay off some interest to keep his kneecaps intact. I was building a new life. I joined a book club. I started dating casually, a nice British architect named Liam, who thought my American accent was charming. I was healing, but a wounded animal is dangerous. And Brett wasn't done yet. He had one last desperate card to play, and it involved the only leverage he thought he had left, the law. He managed to find a shady lawyer, a strip mall ambulance chaser who was willing to sue me for breach of promise to marry and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He wanted $5 million. When the process server arrived at my old house to serve me, he obviously couldn't find me. So, they tried to serve me by publication in the local paper. Mrs. Higgins called me. He's suing you, Val. Let him, I said. I have the truth. We need to countersue, she said. For the money he stole from the wedding fund, for the emotional distress of the affair, and we need to drop the bomb about the baby. Do it, I said. Scorched earth, remember? Oh, I remember, Mrs. Higgins said. I'm drafting the motion now. And Val, I'm asking for attorney's fees. He's going to pay for every minute of my time. I hung up and looked out at the London rain. It felt cleansing. They wanted to fight. They were fighting a ghost. And ghosts are impossible to hit. The legal system moves slowly until it moves very, very fast. 3 months after I left, the hammer finally dropped on Brett Daniels. He was at the bungalow, likely arguing with Tiffany, who was now showing and very unhappy about being broke when the knock came. It wasn't a process server this time. It was the police. They had a warrant. Mrs. Higgins sent me the details later. The district attorney had finalized the investigation into the loan application. Because the lender was federally insured, even though they were predatory, they had backing. The forged signature wasn't just fraud. It was bank fraud. Charges: forgery of a legal document, attempted grand theft, identity theft, wire fraud. Brett was arrested in his boxers and a stained t-shirt. My father, Hank, tried to intervene, yelling, "Do you know who I am?" Nobody knew who he was. The police threatened to arrest him for obstruction, so he backed down. Tiffany filmed the arrest, not to help Brett, but to distance herself. She was already spinning the narrative. She posted a video crying, claiming she was manipulated by an older man and had no idea about the fraud. "I'm just a victim," she sobbed to her 200 followers. "He lied to me, too." The loyalty of the winning team lasted exactly as long as the money did. Brett's bail was set at $100,000. My parents didn't have it. Tiffany certainly didn't have it. He spent 2 weeks in county jail before his parents, who live in Ohio and had been estranged from him due to his gambling, finally mortgaged their house to bail him out. When he got out, he was a different man, broken, desperate. And then came the civil suit. Mrs. Higgins represented me via Zoom. I didn't even have to fly back. I sat in my London kitchen wearing a nice blouse and pajama pants, watching Brett try to explain himself to a judge. His lawyer was incompetent. He tried to argue that the house was implied community property because we were engaged. The judge, a stern woman with zero patience for nonsense, lowered her glasses. "Mr. Daniels, show me the deed first." "I don't have it," Brett stammered. "She tricked me." "You are a grown man, Mr. Daniels," the judge said. "Did you contribute to the mortgage?" "Well, I paid for groceries." "Did you pay the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance?" "No, but..." "Then you have no claim." Case dismissed with prejudice. Then came our countersuit. We demanded the return of the $16,000 wedding fund money he stole for the Hawaii trip. We had the receipts. We had the bank transfers. Judgment for the defendant, me, in the amount of $16,000 plus legal fees, the judge ruled. Brett put his head in his hands. He didn't have $16,000. He didn't have $16. But the real blow came when the judge addressed the intentional infliction of emotional distress claim he had filed against me. "Mr. Daniels," the judge said, looking at the evidence file Mrs. Higgins had submitted, the photos, the sonogram. "You slept with your fiancée's sister, impregnated her, and plotted to steal her home. If anyone is distressed here, it is Ms. Miller. You are lucky she isn't suing you for every penny you will ever make. Get out of my courtroom." I closed the laptop. I took a deep breath. It was over legally. At least I was free. But family is stickier than the law. A few days later, I got an email from Cousin Sarah. Subject: Tiffany. "Val, you need to know. Tiffany lost the baby." I stared at the screen. My stomach dropped. Despite everything, an unborn child was innocent. "Sarah, it happened yesterday. Stress, high blood pressure. The doctors couldn't stop it. She's devastated. She's blaming Brett. She actually threw a vase at him in the hospital. Mom says the family is completely broken. Hank is drinking again. Linda is on tranquilizers. It's a haunted house over there." I felt a wave of sadness. Not for them, really, but for the waste of it all. All that greed, all that scheming. And what did they have to show for it? A criminal record, a lost child, and a mountain of debt. I closed my eyes. I didn't reply to Sarah. There was nothing to say. "Karma," Liam said softly when I told him later that night over dinner. "It's a brutal mechanic." "It is," I agreed. "But I didn't wish for that." "No," he took my hand. "You just got out of the way of the train wreck. You didn't drive the train." He was right. I had stepped off the tracks. They had stayed on, convinced they could stop the locomotive of consequences with their bare hands. The miscarriage was the final nail in the coffin of the winning team. With the baby gone, the only link between Brett and my family was severed. Tiffany turned on him with the ferocity of a wounded animal. She kicked him out of my parents' bungalow the day she got back from the hospital. "Get out!" she screamed, throwing his cheap duffel bag onto the lawn. "You ruined everything you touch. You killed my baby with your stress and your lies." Brett, pending trial and broke, had nowhere to go. He ended up sleeping in his car, a beat-up sedan he bought with his remaining cash, for a week before fleeing back to Ohio to live in his parents' basement. My parents were left with the wreckage of their favorite daughter. Tiffany fell into a deep depression. She refused to work. She blamed everyone: Brett, the doctors, and of course me. "If Valerie hadn't sold the house, I wouldn't have been stressed," she wailed to my mother. "It's her fault. She killed my baby." And my mother, in her infinite delusion, believed her. They started a smear campaign in the town. They told anyone who would listen that I was a monster who evicted my pregnant sister and caused her miscarriage. But small towns talk, and thanks to the email I had sent, everyone knew the timeline. Everyone knew about the affair. The smear campaign backfired. People crossed the street to avoid Linda Miller. The grocery store clerk wouldn't make eye contact with Hank. They were isolated, alone in their small, crowded house, stewing in their own toxicity. Meanwhile, in London, Spring was arriving. The parks were exploding with daffodils. I received a letter from the Department of Justice in California. Subpoena to testify. They needed me for Brett's fraud trial. I called Mrs. Higgins. Do I have to come back? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. No, she said. We can do a video deposition. You are a resident of the UK now. I'll handle it. The deposition was grueling. I had to retell the story, identify the documents, verify my signature was forged. But I did it. Brett took a plea deal. To avoid the maximum sentence of 10 years, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of bank fraud and 1 count of forgery. He was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of probation. He was also ordered to pay restitution, which he would never be able to pay. The day the sentence was handed down, I felt nothing. No joy, no vindication, just a quiet closing of a door. I went for a walk in Hyde Park. I sat on a bench and looked at the swans. I was 33 years old. I was single. Liam and I had parted ways amicably. He moved to Dubai. I was wealthy. I was free. I thought about Aunt Betty. I hoped she was proud. I had protected her legacy by liquidating it. It was a paradox, but it was the only way. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. Usually, I ignored them, but something told me to answer. Hello, Valerie. It was my father. His voice sounded old, broken, slurred like he had been drinking. Dad, I said, my voice steady. Valerie, please, he rasped. Your mother, she's not doing well. The stress. Tiffany is out of control. We're drowning here, Val. The legal fees for the eviction fight, the loans we took for Brett, we're going to lose the house. He was asking for money. After everything, after the name-calling, the theft, the betrayal, he was calling to ask the scapegoat to save them again. Dad, I said. Just a loan, he begged. For family. You have millions now, just $50,000 to save your childhood home. I looked at the swans gliding on the water. They were so graceful, so unbothered. I don't have a childhood home, Hank, I said. I lived in a house with 3 strangers who used me. Don't be cruel, he wept. We're your parents. No, I said. You're Tiffany's parents. Ask her. She has nothing. Then I guess you're all in the same boat, I said. I suggest you sell the bungalow. Downsize. It's what financial advisors recommend. Valerie. Goodbye, Hank. Don't call this number again. I hung up. I blocked the number. I sat there for a long time, waiting for the guilt to come. I waited for the conditioned response of the scapegoat, the urge to fix, to help, to please. It didn't come. Instead, I stood up, brushed the crumbs off my coat, and walked toward the subway. I had a reservation at a new Italian restaurant. I was going to order the most expensive wine on the menu, and I was going to drink it to the memory of the girl who used to be Valerie Miller. Time heals, they say. I don't know if it heals, but it definitely creates distance. 1 year after the Great Escape, my life was unrecognizable. I had been promoted to director of research at the hospital. I had bought a small cottage in the Cotswolds for weekends, a place with a garden that rivaled Aunt Betty's. I was happy, truly, quietly happy. I hadn't heard from my family in 6 months. The last I heard from Cousin Sarah, before I told her to stop updating me because I didn't want to know, was that my parents had indeed lost their house. They were living in a rental apartment. Tiffany was working as a waitress at a diner, looking for her next mark. Brett was in prison, likely polishing floors. Then the final attempt at contact came. It wasn't a call. It was a letter, a handwritten letter on cheap lined paper, forwarded by Mrs. Higgins, who screened my mail. Mrs. Higgins's note attached. Val, you don't have to read this. I can shred it, but I thought you might want closure. I opened it. It was from my mother. Valerie, I am writing this from the hospital. My heart is giving out. The doctor says it's stress, broken heart syndrome. I know we made mistakes. I know we favored Tiffany, but you have to understand, she needed us more. You were always so strong, so independent. We didn't think you needed our help. Brett fooled us all. We're victims, too. Please, Val, I'm an old woman. I don't want to die without seeing my daughter. Come home. We can start over. I forgive you for selling the house. Love, Mom. I stared at the words. I forgive you for selling the house. Even on her deathbed, if she was even dying, which I doubted, Linda Miller was a hypochondriac of the highest order. She couldn't take responsibility. She forgave me. She justified her neglect because I was strong. It is the curse of a competent child. Because you can handle it, they assume you should handle it. And they give all their love to the one who refuses to handle anything. I walked to my fireplace in the cottage. I had a nice fire crackling. I held the letter over the flames. I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. They were stuck in a loop of their own making, rewriting history to make themselves the heroes or the victims, never the villains. I watched the paper curl and blacken. The words, "Love, Mom," turned into ash and floated up the chimney. I didn't reply. I didn't go back. I learned later that she recovered just fine. It was a panic attack, not a heart attack. She tried to use it to get money from a GoFundMe she set up. I donated $5 anonymously. Just for the irony. That was the last contact I ever had with the Miller family. I am writing this from my garden in the Cotswolds. The roses are in bloom. Aunt Betty's favorite variety, peace roses. I managed to find a grower here who had them. It's been 3 years since I got on that plane. I am Valerie Miller. I am 35 years old. I am not married, but I am deeply loved. I met Alex a year ago. He's a landscape architect. He loves dirt under his fingernails, just like me. When I told him my story, the whole ugly, messy truth, he didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with awe. You saved yourself, he said. That's the bravest thing I've ever heard. We're sitting on the patio now. He's sketching a new design for the herb garden. I'm finishing the script for you all. Brett was released early on parole last month. I got the notification. He's barred from working in finance or real estate. He's back in Ohio. I hear he's trying to become a life coach on TikTok. You can't make this stuff up. Tiffany is on her second marriage. A guy she met at the diner. I hope he has a good prenup. My parents are somewhere. Existing. I don't hate them anymore. Hate takes energy. Hate keeps you tethered. I have reached a state of indifference. They are just people I used to know. Characters in a book I finished reading. I often think about the woman I was that night in the kitchen, shaking, terrified, holding the iPad. I want to reach back through time and hug her. I want to tell her it's going to be okay. You are going to be richer, stronger, and happier than you can imagine. Just get on the damn plane. To all of you listening to this story, if you are the strong one in your family, if you are the fixer, if you are the one who gives and gives until you are hollow, while others take and take until they are full, stop. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm, especially if those others are holding the matches. Financial independence is your shield. Boundaries are your sword. And self-love, that's the fortress they can never breach. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being my witnesses. Now, tell me what you think. Have you ever faced betrayal so deep it changed the entire course of your life? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? I really want to hear your stories in the comments below. And remember, if your fiancé goes on a secret trip with your sister, sell the house. Sell it all. And buy yourself a ticket to freedom. Because the best revenge isn't ruining them, it's saving yourself. Take care, everyone. And don't forget to water your own garden.